Hi, this short video has been produced to help with questions that may appear in the Scottish Qualification Authority's exam for the Higher Physics course, specifically focusing on content relating to our dynamic universe, and within that, motion or equations and graphs. So here we have our this is our second question. And it is: a rocket is launched at 45 degrees from the horizontal with a speed of 3,000 meters per second. Which makes the correct statement about the vertical and horizontal components of the initial velocity of the rocket? So immediately we know we're looking at angles, and we're probably looking at right-angled triangles. You can tell from the options in the answers that we're definitely going to be looking at sines and cosines. So you have a sense for what the question's asking. However, still read the question closely. Try and strip out all the nonsense words. For example, the question could just be, what is the horizontal and vertical component of that triangle? Recall what part of the course is being referred to so you don't complicate it with other parts of the course, and then just read the question again in your brain, not out loud in the exam room. And avoid overcomplicating. If you suddenly get lost in the options, just stop and start again, and sometimes that works wonders. So the question is asking us about one thing. It's trigonometry, isn't it? The sines and cosines, and you can tell that, of course, by looking at the choice of answers you have on offer. You may find it useful to refer to the additional relationships sheet at the end of the examination paper. It's easy to forget about that, but it has a range of equations and things to prompt your thinking, and it will remind you here about the trigonometry relationships. Sines and cosines in this instance relate to a right angle triangle, and we can see there is one here in the image where we know the angle is 45 degrees and the length of one side is the vertical component and the length of the other side is the horizontal component. The hypotenuse in this case is obviously related to the speed, that's 3,000 meters per second. So we are asked to find the vertical and the horizontal components. And what does it mean to do that? It means they want to know what are the lengths of those two sides, and the number we get we then convert into meters per second, and that is the speeds that we are looking for. So what are other names for these vertical and horizontal components? Well, we know by looking that if we remember SQA, if that's the way you have been taught, SQA, very badly written. The sine is related to the opposite side and the hypotenuse, and the cosine is related to the adjacent side and the hypotenuse. And on the triangle we can see that the vertical component is opposite 45 degrees, so that's the opposite side. The horizontal component is adjacent to the 45 degrees, so that's the adjacent side. So let's just remind ourselves of the answers we're being offered. So here's A to E and the vertical and horizontal components. We know that the sine or cosine has to map to the angle. It doesn't have any relationship with the 3,000. So sine something, cosine something has to relate to that 45 degrees. That's useful because it helps us knock out some of these options. Anywhere where you see the 3,000 being connected to a cosine or sine, we know can't be correct. That lets us get rid of A, because cosine and sines both have 3,000 there. It lets us clear C, because the cosine and sine are again both 3,000. But it lets us also get rid of D, where the cosine has 3,000 after it. So we're already, without doing much, know that the answer is either B or E. So which is it? Well, the vertical component is to do with the opposite side, and we can see from these formula that the opposite side is related to the sine function. So we want to see something in the vertical column that uses the sine function, not the cosine function. And there's only one option that's giving us that, and that's option B. So we don't even need to work out the horizontal part because we already know opposite is vertical and vertical is to do with sine. So there we are. We're now in a position to answer this question. So there we have it. We know that sine 45 is the opposite over the hypotenuse, which is equal to the vertical component over 3000. And if we were to rearrange that, we can see the vertical component is 3000 sine 45. And that's all we have to look for. 3000 sine 45. There's one there. And we know it's not this one, D, because of this. But for completeness, there we have it. It's B. So key things to note here was to recognize there's a right angle triangle at play, and to recognize that an angle is provided, 45, and the length of a side was provided, 3000. And recognize there's a question where you can quickly eliminate some of the multiple choices because the angle has to map with the sine or cosine function. Recognize that vertical and horizontal are just different ways of saying opposite and adjacent, and that once you find the sine part, you can more or less just jump to the answer on this one. But that might not always be possible, so do validate it by checking the cosine. As always, there are some other examples to try at my Hi page, hy.page/physics, FYSX. You can try those there. Answers are provided. But for now, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.